So you know what? Let's get started. So I have to tell you, this is our final night because Marcus, who's scheduled for tomorrow, couldn't make it through. Just for a variety of reasons with the Washington Post. Just got an assignment, as everyone knows, when you have a job, you've got to grab it and take it. So he'll be on at another time. And I'm thanking everyone, for all of you who showed up all week and all of our presenters. So we have Heidi Levine tonight, and she actually is in Ukraine, and it's the middle of the night. So her and I recorded this earlier in the week, which you will see. And I have to tell everyone, a lot of this images are incredibly graphic. So you've been warned and you're aware, and on and on and on. Also tonight, we have a dear friend, Lily Tomko, who's going to play a beautiful, beautiful piano piece for us to send us off for the evening. So Jay, let's get Heidi on, and here's Heidi Levine. So Heidi is with us tonight, Heidi Levine, and we're thrilled to have her. She's gone through a lot of trials and tribulations to get here tonight. It's just about the middle of the night in Ukraine, and we're thrilled to have her. It's been a long time coming, and I turn it over to you, Heidi. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I would like to also take this opportunity to thank the people that I have met here in Ukraine, who have allowed me to document their lives, to help them tell their story, and all the help that people have given me here as well. I also would like to take this moment to relay my condolences to those who have lost their lives, the people in Ukraine, and also I certainly have a lot of colleagues who have been killed trying to cover this war. It's a great privilege to be able to do what I do, and I feel really grateful for being here and being able to show my work and trying to give a voice to this terrible conflict. And when I first came to Ukraine, I came just a few days before the war. Honestly, I'm based in the Middle East. I've been covering the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for a long time. I'm actually someone who really hates conflict and war. And I was actually in the Emirates at a photo festival together with another photographer, a Russian colleague of mine, and we were both talking about whether or not the war is going to break out, and we were both really hoping this wasn't going to happen. But within 2 days of arriving in Ukraine, the war did break out. In the beginning, the people were making Molotov cocktails. This is an underground factory in Kyiv where men and women and even children were filling bottles. I've seen Molotov cocktails used in the West Bank against Israeli soldiers, but I've never seen an actual Molotov cocktail factory.
And Heidi, can you tell how long that was in the process? Like how long, like before or when the war started, did they automatically go to let's make the cocktails?
I mean, I believe that people are already starting to prepare. They were collecting bottles, they were storing them in basements. They had collected the styrofoam balls that we see that they would fill, and then fill the bottles with gasoline.
So those styrofoam balls become projectiles?
Yes, when they're thrown, they become projectiles.
Wow.
Yes, and I've seen them used a lot, but I've never seen like a whole society join in to make them this way.
Pretty
When I've seen
amazing,
it.
right?
What?
Pretty amazing
Yes.
how they pull it all together like that.
Yes, I mean that's really what really strikes me about the people in Ukraine is that everyone here is playing their part to try to protect their country. I met, for example, in this photograph, these are volunteers in the territorial defense. This woman is a lawyer. She's trying to protect her neighborhood. I mean, everyone tried to participate to try to stop the invasion. It worked in Kiev, but as you know, it's ongoing in other places.
Yeah.
Oops. And after by the second day of the war, and there was an airstrike on this apartment building in Kiev. And as the war progressed, just within days, um, mothers in a children's hospital were taking care of their children in an underground ward of the hospital to stay safe during the air sirens. Most of the men had been already drafted into the military, so you barely ever saw any of their husbands with them because they were off in the army. Imagine yourself dealing with a sick child and having to live underground under such conditions. Hospitals should be sterile and nobody should have to live like this. Even maternity wards. Um, this is also in the children's hospital. This is a maternity hospital. Women maternity wards were going underground as well. I spoke to many women who were just petrified. They didn't know where they would be going afterwards once their babies were born. A lot of the women came to the hospitals before they actually went into labor because they were too afraid what would happen if they had to be transported to the hospital in the middle of the night and if there were attacks going on. This woman also just gave birth to a baby.
And everyone's very accommodating in letting you photograph and move through these spaces, huh, Heidi?
To be honest, I really didn't have a lot of problems. I mean, things have changed where access has become more difficult regarding like photographing the military. Um, especially anytime that anything happens to a journalist, then they try to restrict us even more. So it's definitely a lot harder today than it was in the beginning of the war, and just after a few weeks, it did become harder. So, but as far as the civilians, I really have not encountered any problems. And in fact, people often stop and hug me, and I put my camera down, and it becomes an emotional exchange. And so many people just say, "Thank you so much for being here." So yeah, I believe that people want the media to tell their story and they just wish that they had more help. And
Right.
that's what everyone keeps telling me all the time.
Yeah, so they certainly see the value of the journalist documenting this to get the message out.
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, not only that, I mean, I'll tell you a story later on where, we're often, in many areas, people have been completely cut off from cell phone services, electricity, even water. And in some situations, I've met people who haven't been able to even reach their families that have fled and their families actually haven't been able to reach their other family members who have stayed. So uh, I have actually like been given the phone number of a family member to call, and then get someone to call the other family member back, to connect the two together. So that's that's really a really truly a rewarding part of the job, is when you feel like you can make a difference.
Yeah, so yeah, you have to assume some families, when God willing, when this ends, it will take months, a
Mhm.
lot, 6 to 8 months to actually find your husband and your wife. I mean, because if everyone's moving around and trying to be safe, and you can't go back to your neighborhood because it's gone,
Right.
like that sort of networking is going to
Mhm.
be an incredible task, um,
Right.
to put people back together.
Right. And there's still a lot of people missing. There are a lot of dead, who have not been identified. There are people that are now under Russian control that can't reach their families. There are also families who have been torn apart because some families don't want to flee and have opted out to stay where they are. And which means they are now under Russian control. And, this conflict has also caused, people, families to stop speaking to one another if they had any kind of differences about the war. So
Yeah,
it's really tearing everyone apart. It's tearing, I mean, it's destroying the wildlife, it's destroying animals. I've seen cows killed. I've seen a pig farm hit by a Russian missile strike, people's homes destroyed.
and it's mostly the elderly that want to stay along, from what we've been seeing, right? They
Right,
don't want to
right,
leave their homes.
right. That's correct. My space bar is a little bit tight, and
Well,
um, this war is leaving people without their loved ones. This woman's husband was killed on the front line.
Heidi, this is an interesting photograph in that, how long does it take you as a journalist to be able to make a photograph like this and keep the dignity of the soul that has been lost? Right? I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, right?
Um, no, it's not easy. I think for me personally, I find it extremely difficult to watch people who have lost someone suffer at these funerals. I can't imagine myself ever being on the other side of the camera. And after all, I am a human being, and if anyone were to tell me not to photograph, I wouldn't
Right.
pursue it. I wouldn't, the one thing I don't want to do is to make somebody more upset, and preserving the dignity of the people I am documenting is really my top priority. And I try to be quiet and wait for the moment. And it's truly heartbreaking to witness. But this family didn't ask me or anyone else to leave. There was just a few of us there, and you know, we try very hard not to impose ourselves, and to be respectful. I can't imagine being on the other side of the camera.
Right. I have to imagine this is a harder photograph to take than taking a photograph of a dead soldier on the street. Would
Right.
that be right?
Yes, yes, yes. I think the two different components of this war that were um extremely difficult for me to emotionally is to watch the suffering of the people that are still alive, see how their homes have been destroyed, but and see their loved ones taken away from them way too soon. But what witnessing this mass exodus of people fleeing was something I don't think I was prepared personally and in advance. I've covered refugee crisis, but not to this level. I've never seen anything like this. I was in Lesbos covering the crisis there, and that was also really difficult. So I can't stop from imagining, like, what are you going to take with you? And I watched people this is another funeral. My space bar is a little bit sticky, so this is the Airpin Bridge. Even disabled or fleeing. So as I said, watching this kind of exodus of people and the difficulty that they were having and it was really difficult to see. I mean, can you imagine your grandfather being carried on someone's back?
Just impossible. Yeah.
Or what it would be like to carry your own family. And this woman, elderly woman, was carried through the snow from Irpin across that broken the bridge that actually had been destroyed by the Ukraine, partially destroyed by the Ukrainians to try to stop the Russians from advancing on Kiev.
It's always interesting when you look at these photographs that, like, they're Ukrainians, and then in a few short days they become refugees.
Right.
And I really never thought of that word in such a dramatic way, that all of a sudden you're a refugee. How did that happen?
Right.
I mean, it's very intriguing, that word.
Yeah. And I mean, this man, I mean, this was also bizarre to witness. The Ukrainian soldiers caught him. He was accused of actually stealing from the refugees, and they saran wrapped him to a pole. You don't see it in this image, but they pulled his pants down so everybody could see his genitals, and he was just tied to this pole.
Right. I think I don't know if Ron Haviv.
Yes, we were together.
We were together, right? Okay, yeah,
yes.
You were. No, that the police later on come by and arrest.
Right.
Is that what happens? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it's been explained to me that this is actually a tradition that's gone on for a very long time.
Right. I mean, how powerful is that? I mean, for your entire society to know that you turned on them, right? I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Right. What can I say? It's definitely seems to be an effective way of punishment.
Yeah.
And the person isn't able to move, and run away until the police come. It's been, as I said, it's been explained to me that this is not an uncommon practice, although for us, it looked truly bizarre. I mean, when Ron and I saw it, like we were we were both shocked to see it and be actually allowed to photograph it as well.
I mean, it is some type of I don't know if torture is the right word, or yes, somebody would have to write that, a writer better than myself, to put that in a context.
Mm.
Right?
And this is also in European. I was actually together with Ron, and we actually crossed the bridge and jumped into a vehicle of volunteers, because you can't drive across this bridge that's been partially destroyed, just like the people had difficulty crossing it. And we witnessed all these people running. Bucha is actually in the distance. This woman is carrying a white piece of cloth as a symbolic white flag, so that nobody would shoot at her. The women were even with their dogs and animals, their children.
Yeah. Heidi, can you speak a little bit to the relationship when you collaborate with another photographer, that it's you and somebody else, and how that works?
Well, for example, Ron and I have known each other for, I think it's like 3 decades now, at
Wow.
least. And we've worked together in Ukraine, we've worked together in Georgia, we've worked together in Libya. We're very close friends, and I believe, like, we each have our own style. What's really makes our relationship great, both as friends and colleagues, is that there's a lot of trust between us. We both have been working for over 3 decades in conflict zones, so collectively we have a lot of experience between us. And it's really, really important to know that someone has your back. And I don't normally like to work with a lot of people around, but in these situations, I think it's important for your own security, and also and your planning process, to have someone that has experience and that you trust and by your side. And even if I'm in a crisis mode or a bad mood, I will pick up the phone to call him and some of my other very close colleagues to, talk things through. And, as freelancers, it can be quite lonely out there. I've been very, very lucky. I've been on assignment for the Washington Post since the start of the war, which, just happened when I arrived in Ukraine, and I'm still on assignment for them on a contract. So, you know, as I said, as a freelancer, like, there's a lot that you have to do for yourself, planning process, the financial aspect of the story, what's it going to cost us, um, you know, I don't, none of us are in this to make money. It's to tell the story, and that's really what's important. But as I said, it's important, especially in this war. It's very, very different. I try to catch myself from trying to make comparisons between the war in Ukraine and my decades of coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because covering an artillery war like this war is completely different. And although at times it seems as though things are very safe, um, all of a sudden you can get cluster bombed, which has happened to me a couple times. Luckily nothing happened and I was safe. But it is really different. And although I've had a lot of experience, still, even the most experienced can be wounded, or or get caught up in the wrong situation. And this photograph was taken in Bucha, just after Bucha was liberated. Bucha is just outside of Kiev. And then the war crimes here were just horrendous. There's still a lot of investigations going on. Out behind this building, we saw the bodies of 8 men who had been shot to death. We could see evidence that they were executed. There's been a video released of them, showing them being led across the street by Russian troops. I could even identify some of the people in that video and the photographs that I took later on.
Heidi, are these independent policemen in that shot?
They're not police. These are men that I actually saw the other day when I was in Bucha, that are volunteers, have been working since the beginning of the war, collecting bodies, digging graves. I don't know how they do this job. I saw them the other day digging graves, and it was really, really hot. They were working with their shirts off, and I just can't even imagine the nightmares that they've been having.
Yeah.
This is also in Bucha just after it was liberated. This woman named Victoria had just been brought to like this little basement area where her husband had been tortured and executed by the Russians. And her reaction. And this is actually the place where her husband, along with other men, were tortured and executed. And this was a horrific scene, and one I've never seen before, where Ukrainian investigators discovered the several bodies of Ukrainian men. One had been decapitated. There was another corpse where you could see that they had tried to sever the neck but didn't succeed. We were told by a resident who had known the man and had been there the hours before and told us that a Russian soldier was talking with these men and then left, and then came back and even started talking about his own family life, and then left and came back very drunk and executed these men. And this is, we assumed, a body of a teenager. It also looks like his shoelaces were tied, and this is in the basement of a home in Bucha.
So over time, Heidi, you must start to recognize some of these things. You know, even if somebody's not explaining it to you, you've already figured it out. Like noticing the shoelaces are tied, that's hands behind the back.
Yes.
You know, those types of things. So it almost becomes forensic on some level for you guys as well, right?
I mean, I do find that one of the ways that I do protect myself emotionally when I'm in these kind of situations, including in not just in Ukraine, but in Gaza, that I start to kind of put myself into this forensic mode, you know, and look for the entry wound, look for evidence. I mean, we're also trying to reconstruct the crime scene, and this is especially here in Ukraine and other places, but you know, there's such strong evidence of war crimes that have happened and are still happening. So yes, it is very much like being a bit more than a bit forensic, but I think it's also kind of like and kind of protects us or protects me a little bit emotionally, because I become so focused at trying to look for evidence. And yes. Even dogs also in Bucha. as you see, one of the family's dog was even executed. Um, People weren't able to bring the dead to a cemetery and were just burying people in their own backyard. After Bucha was later liberated, the bodies were exhumed and given a proper burial. But under the Russian occupation, people had no choice, but they didn't want to keep the bodies in the house, and they really couldn't go any further. Even going out and burying someone in their own backyard was risking their life.
For so many of these people, it's the emotions are places in your mind that you never could really imagine, right? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
like you just can't imagine that your husband is in the other room for
Mhm.
4 days before you can bury him. I mean, that must be
Right. Yes.
an unbelievable place to go mentally.
Right. And this is also in Bucha. One of the residents had told us that they had to bury somebody, and the policeman went back, and another policeman came and started to dig up the grave and pull the body out. And this is like weeks afterwards. And they're still discovering bodies.
Certainly, as time goes by, this is going to be an ongoing thing that people are going to find bodies months from now, years from now, right? In their
Yes,
backyards, right?
right. In Bucha, hundreds were buried in a mass grave during the Russian occupation. So after the liberation, the bodies were exhumed from the grave. There's still bodies that need to be identified even today.
Yeah.
Um, as you can see, I mean, most of the bodies, but not all, were placed in garbage bags or body bags. But as you can see in this photograph at the mass grave, someone's hand is showing through the sand. This is at a cemetery in Bucha, where I tried to actually count the body bags. They were separating the bodies, the corpses, into two groups: the ones that had evidence of torture, and another pile was separated and labeled. Uh, they believe that they were executed. So this was a long process. The police would unzip the body bags, um, try to take notes. At one point, I tried to actually count, and I mean, there was just piles, and I lost count. I couldn't physically count because there are so many and so many piles on top of each other.
I mean, no one walks away from those moments the same. It just can't be, huh, Heidi?
No, this woman, her her name is Julia. I took this photograph of her when I was in Vorzel, which is a suburb also outside of Kiev, not far from Bucha. And she actually started to tell me how she was almost raped by a Russian soldier. He knocked on the front door of her house and demanded that she go with him to the shed in the backyard. She was forced to go. He had a weapon. and he had held her at gunpoint, but her dog followed her, and luckily the dog started barking and growling, and he got scared and ran off. And then she spent the next week living in hiding in the basement because she was scared that he'd come back for her. So we have also heard many cases of rape as well. This is also, I mean, everybody was burying their dead, military, civilians, that cows were executed in a village outside Cherniv that we were able to get to. It was a horrific scene.
The smell must be unbelievable in these places as well, huh, Heidi?
Yes, yes. In fact, I was at a funeral the other day, and the one thing I did say was the smell was horrible. This is Mushun, which isn't so far away from Kyiv. At the time, it felt like it was very far away because, we had to get to places. We had to, drive insane distances just to bypass the areas that were unsafe, to try to get to actually get to an area that was near the Russians. These are actually dead Russian soldiers. The man walking here is a Ukrainian soldier that was showing us around. The visit was it was pretty intense. We ended up getting shelled and taking cover in a basement together with the soldiers. Our vehicle got shot at on our way out. As you see, the scenes are horrific. Again, these are Russian soldiers.
You know,
Just,
Heidi, it's sort of an interesting thing as, all of us, on the outside looking in, it's all these young men, women, dead, and it almost, it becomes the same in so many ways of an unnecessary war, right?
Mhm,
It's just young, dead people,
right,
right? Like, because we couldn't tell if that was a Russian or a Ukrainian soldier. It's
right.
it's sort of an intriguing thing as a because of course your instinct is, oh, I should hate all the Russians, but when you just see a dead young soldier, it's a
Yeah,
young man,
right. I mean, look,
young
I'm a
woman,
mother of 3 kids, right? So
right? Yeah.
I can't help but to think, like, you know, this man, for example, he came out and showed me a picture of himself and his granddaughter, and there was no communication there in Mushan. So he gave us his phone number of his relatives that he hadn't spoken to for weeks. And we called, and his relatives, his daughter and granddaughter, were actually in Lviv. And we passed a message from his granddaughter and daughter through the commander that showed us what was happening in Mushon back to this man, because I couldn't call him because he had no communications there, just to let him know that the family was okay. And that was like, really incredible to be able to do, and quite emotional, because he didn't know if they were even alive. They didn't know if he was still alive. So yeah, I actually went a few days ago back to Moshun to try to retrace my footsteps from that day. But it was really, really difficult to try to pinpoint where I was in those scenes that I've been showing you. We're in the different seasons. It was winter then. There was a lot of outgoing and incoming, and things were very tense. We were moving very quickly. We were afraid that the Russians could be tracking us. But it was quite interesting to go back.
I guess doing those gestures of compassion must help you mentally go through a process like this,
Mm,
right? You know, like, to help a family in the smallest of
yeah,
ways is the
yeah,
biggest thing for them. But
right.
psychologically for you, that's got to be, incredibly rewarding.
It is really rewarding, and if I can, just do something small like that, then I feel like I'm doing what I'm here to do. And you know, it goes beyond taking pictures and reporting. As I said, like there are many times where I put my camera down and just hug somebody or try to help somebody. I saw a soldier that had been wounded in a hospital, and he was in incredible pain, and the nurse came in and tried to wanted to change his bandage, which was really, really painful. So I just asked him to squeeze my hand, and, really, really tight. I mean, believe it or not, when I even get a blood test, I need two people to hold my hand and squeeze because I'm so scared of needles. So I succeeded to distract him while the nurse changed the bandage, and he, squeezed. I kept just saying, squeeze tight as you can. And even though he really didn't understand my English, he understood what I was trying to do, and it was very grateful.
Mm.
And the nurse succeeded. And we talked earlier about the elderly and disabled being evacuated. This is a train station from Pakrovsk, and these elderly women were actually being evacuated from the nursing home because it wasn't safe to stay there. And they waited in the back of this van, huddled together, sometimes holding each other's hands for I witnessed for at least an hour. And it was just heartbreaking, and this is not the situation that people should be in at all. And I mean, can you imagine, as I said earlier, if this was your grandmother and she had to go through this? And as you can't help but to think, what if? This war is taking place in Europe. We're not in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And uh, she was traveling in the train by herself, and petrified. Many of these people actually, like, they didn't even know where they were going. Um they had no idea where they're going and where they're actually going to get off the train and where they'll go later.
And how would they have the wherewithal to connect with their children? Right?
Exactly. I mean, we actually saw, like, even, some people had like a note saying, please call, my son. Um,
Right.
and yeah, I mean,
Because at some point the structure breaks down from the
mhm,
60 people leaving a nursing home
right.
because you are in war, right? I
Mm,
mean, what is, can there be a system of, like, okay, this one went here, this one went there, and there's a holding section for information? My God.
mhm,
And not knowing has got to be the most painful thing.
right. This is in eastern Ukraine. This woman's home apartment building was hit by Russian airstrikes. She told me that she was thrown from the living room to the kitchen. Uh, Again, I was really, really worried that she could have suffered a concussion. But just like the resilience too. I mean, can you imagine yourself being thrown by a blast across from one room to another, almost 90 years old, and you're ready to, walk down the stairs. Uh, this is a hospital in Kramatorsk. As you see, the windows are secured with mattresses and pillows. The glass is taped so that if there's an airstrike, to try to protect the patient in the hospital. This woman was in Lysychansk, and again has no way to contact her family directly. There's no cell phone or internet working there. She was actually writing a letter to her son, and then the letter was photographed, would be later photographed by a volunteer and then sent by WhatsApp or Telegram to her relative. And that's the way she could communicate.
I mean, that almost looks like World War II, right? I mean, that's how
Yeah, yeah.
it's unbelievable.
I mean, from the beginning of this war, I mean, I couldn't help but just keep thinking, like, what it must have been like for the people during World War II.
I mean, it has to be a scene like this in one version or another.
Right. It's almost like
Handle
we're
it.
seeing scenes that are, very similar, the mass exodus of people, that but in color and not black and white.
Yeah.
Also in Lysychansk, I counted, I think, almost 40 people. They just made beds out of chairs. This woman also separated from her family. And some of the people has family is actually now under Russian territory control.
The
Um,
photographs on that table, were those her children? If you go back to that shot, Heidi,
and let me see.
was she showing you photographs on the
Oh, on the table?
yeah on the blue there? Are they photographs?
No, they're not photographs. They're actually images of saints.
Ah, okay, makes sense, right?
So she would start
Right.
praying.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any water. People would go to the fire station and collect water. This woman, the field outside her village had been hit by Russian missiles. She came out in her bathrobe.
How beautiful. Yeah, she was.
This is actually at a hospital, the hospital in Kramatorsk and in Sloviansk, excuse me, where they didn't even the hospital didn't have running water. So the doctors and staff had to come out with buckets when a water truck came so that they could fill up water, so that the hospital would actually have any water supply. And this is an incident where we were visiting some soldiers. There were only like 2 tanks, and everything seemed calm and quiet. Then all of a sudden, shells. We started getting shelled by the Russians very close by, like within 100 meters. And I myself, together with the Washington Post correspondent and our fixer and security guy, we all had to together with the soldiers, take shelter under the tank. These are some soldiers that had just come out of Lysychansk, and then they were just standing on the side of the road. Then they thought they heard a Russian drone above and ran into the woods. And that's the other thing that's making this war really dangerous and difficult, are the drones.
So Heidi, there's got to be a moment like you're finding yourself hiding underneath that tank. Like, at some point, do you say to yourself, "This is really it"? Did ever? I mean, that enter your mind?
It was scary. Of course. I know it was especially scary for the others. Luckily, nothing happened. The tank sped away very quickly afterwards. It was definitely not my first time being under fire, but it was definitely the first time I've ever had to take cover under a tank. So, but I felt okay. I wasn't at that point to say, okay, this is it. There was also our correspondent, Siobhan Grady, had her recorder on the phone going at the time, so listening to the audio was even after the incident was quite emotional, and I'm sure very emotional for anyone else that knows us to listen to that.
Oh, so you heard the recording of her being on the phone.
Well, we were together, and she was actually right before the incident happened. She was using her phone for her interview with the soldiers. So the phone was still recording when we came under shelling, and it was kept on the entire time. So
Wow.
I think, for anyone to listen to the full recording, it's has a great impact. And we had a lot of support from the Washington Post that were very concerned on our well-being and made sure that we pull back. Here I really want to take a moment and discuss this. I photographed about a month ago, and just by chance that morning I said, let's go take a ride, because you never know what you're going to find. And by chance we found these soldiers just at the edge of the woods that were wounded. In the beginning, they said, it's very dangerous here, go, 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 don't photograph, we don't want any media. But our security man, Ben, is a combat medic, and when I showed them his medical bag, they said, okay, come. And it was quite incredible, because I also not only documented this situation and the injured soldiers, but also watched our security guy actually help save lives. See, and it took about at least 30 minutes before a military ambulance came to evacuate these wounded soldiers that had been near Lysychansk and on their way back, when they came under fire of cluster bombs by the Russians, and suffered a lot of injuries. So
Heroes every other day, huh, Heidi?
yeah, and as you see to the right of the frame is our security guy, and it was an emotional experience to to document, to witness, and yeah. Right.
Well,
We later found out that nobody died, and everyone survived. So
good.
with with that note, I think
That's it.
thank you.
Heidi, I cannot tell you how much we appreciate you doing this again in the middle of the night in a hotel in Ukraine. I mean, that's
Well, it's not the middle of the night yet. It's only
almost
11. It's 11 p.m. my time.
okay. But we really appreciate it, and maybe what we can do is on Thursday night we can run this, and if you happen to be up, you can
Okay.
join in and we can do questions because this
Okay.
is
My space,
perfect.
I apologize. My space bar is sticks, and that's because my cat, when she was a kitten, knocked the computer off the bed, and
Never
yeah.
the same. But this is really great. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and getting you to be in a safe place and all the traveling and everything. I really appreciate it. And you have a standing offer to come back and show us new work
Okay.
whenever it fits for you. And that you were frightened to speak, it's over. I mean, you're terrific. You're absolutely terrific.
Well,
You're a
thank
great,
you.
great guest.
Well,
Great guest.
thank you. Thank you. I mean, I guess we all have our fears, and nobody would really imagine how scared I am of having a blood my blood taken at by or speaking in public.
I can't believe you could put both of those in the same sentence, but you just did.
Right.
And being a war photojournalist, so everyone has their issues, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so Heidi, certainly for everyone who's going to see this, be safe all the time.
Okay. All right. Thank you so
All right,
much.
you can stop
Good night.
sharing. Thank you. So that was Heidi Levine. That just really really incredible. Even seeing it now, seeing it for the first time, even if I was part of it, is really amazing. I do want to thank Ron Haviv for answering a bunch of questions in the chat room. That was very nice of him. I don't know if he's still here, but thank you, Ron, for doing that. That's really wonderful. So I really really do appreciate that. I do want to mention something. I don't know if many of you are familiar with Max Hirschfeld. He's out of DC, and he's put together, he wanted me to give him a shout out, imagesforhumanity.org. And it's an organization, it's a nonprofit that him and Andy Anderson have started to raise money. And he told me that they just sent a check to the Ukrainian Red Cross for $25,000. So again, the name of that is imagesforhumanity.org. So if you want to do some research, you certainly can do that. And as I told you, that was pretty stirring work. I mean, just unbelievable. But what I have now is something that it sort of fits the end of the week, and it's a young woman, Lily Tomko, who's a wonderful pianist, and we got her to play a. It's called. We would say melody, and it's about a family after World War II in Western Ukraine whose members are at opposing political sides, and it's been in a movie. And the Ukrainian composer, I will certainly crucify the name, is Myroslav Sokurov. I will put the name in the chat room so that for the record I have it there. But I'm going to ask Jay to cue that up and play it. Being here, we'll come on right after she's done. But here's Lily. It is pretty hard to follow that. So we can open up the mic if anyone wants to continue to chat. That would be nice. If not, again, I thank Ron for helping us out answering a whole bunch of questions, and Lily for that beautiful performance, and Heidi. So I thank everyone who's been in all week and people who popped in here and there. All these videos will be up on our YouTube channel by Friday night or Saturday, the latest. So I just want to thank everyone, and we'll continue to do this periodically, because there's a lot of photographers who are just in these war zones who can't get to secure places to do presentations, but many want to. I mentioned earlier on that Friday, tomorrow, Marcus got pulled away on another assignment that he can't get to a secure place. So Friday is off for tomorrow, but we will do it again. And any comments, you can put them in here. You can
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So for someone like Heidi or like other photojournalists who are away in Ukraine, for example, do the people of Ukraine know, like, how do they stay safe outside of obviously like physically staying safe and taking cover? Like, do the citizens know what a photojournalist's job is? Like, can they differentiate between them and just like a regular citizen, or is it really just like having to feel like you really live there and keep yourself as safe as possible? I don't know if my question, does that make sense?
No, it does, but there's no guarantee that you're going to be safe. Ron or any other journalist who's been in a war zone, they have a on their shirts or hats it says press, but they're they're in there's no reason why. And it happens all the time, Amelia, where a missile hits and you're in the wrong place. Right. So it's
but like the community has a certain amount of like understanding or respect for photojournalists or press, like people who are there to do a job, like they understand that in that way.
They understand it, and they see the value of getting the message out. That was a piece of that part of the puzzle, where they want the journalists there to document everything that's going on so that the rest of the world can see it, and the rest of the world sees it, then we as Americans or Europeans or people, all countries around the world, want to help these poor people suffering, and that goes to any war zone. So
So just to, sorry, just last thing, just to add on to that, when Ron said, you know, they stay in hotels like in the front line, or near front lines, like, is that, so who else stays there? Is it just press? Is it just people who are there for work, or do Ukrainian people try to stay there as well, like to protect themselves? How does that work?
it's a little bit of both, where, you know, and Ron, if you're there, you can jump in, where they know that the press is predominantly in this hotel or that hotel, in one of those places. So, you know, to have the last sense of humanity, to make sure that no bombs go there, because it's outsiders. Not that it's just the press, it's just outside, and there's just people, right? So there's people. I would assume that there are people who, you know, are staying in that hotel, just, you know, for their own safety. They got nowhere else to go. But I know that the journalists are in those hotels, and they're paying for those rooms, and some of them are being paid for by the Washington Post or the New York Times. But a lot of times, if you're an independent journalist, you're paying it yourself. But there's no guarantee, you know, because in a war situation, a missile goes astray, and that's it. I mean, that happens.
Right.
That happens all the time.
It's also
Right,
a
so
mixed, Frank. It's also, just to add to that, I mean, there's also times, especially in the first month of the war, where the Russians knew where all of us were. There are Russian spies in the cities, and we were also very afraid of either being collateral damage or the hotels being targeted, just to force us to leave. So it kind of depends. Some of the hotels are mixed with refugees and press. Other times are aid workers and press and government officials. Every kind of situation, or every place is a little bit different depending on what's going on. But where you're staying is one of the most primary things that we have to decide in terms of safety. What's the best place to stay? Because there have been a number of incidences over the years where journalists have chosen the wrong place, and they've been hit and they've been bombed in that location because the other side knew where they were and targeted them.
How do you figure out where to stay? How do you figure out, like, where would you do that kind of research to know what's safest?
Well, you first go where you can get the best upgrades. That's like one of the most important things. And then after that, you know, you kind of figure out location and so on. I think in the beginning, like Heidi and I stayed at one hotel because the hotel was near the embassy of Belarus. And we thought that if the Russians decided to start attacking the hotels, we were in a relatively good place because they wouldn't want to attack anywhere near an embassy of one of their only allies in the war.
Wow.
There's when you watch CNN, you see there's the Sophia Church behind in all the stand-ups. The Intercontinental Hotel is where a lot of the TV is staying, but it's also next to the churches, which many people thought gave that hotel protection, but it's also next to a number of government buildings, which people thought perhaps if the Russians decided to really attack the capital and attack the infrastructure, the hotel would actually be a very dangerous place. So everybody had a very different decision on where they were going to stay in the logic.
Wow, thank you.
I have a question, and I think it's directed to Ron, although I don't see your face, but you seem to have the most experience in having heard this all week, and then the other one in reference to this. And Heidi said that she also works in the Middle East. How do you as photographers decide? Last night we had someone who said he left. I can't remember his name, Frank, and he made the decision he had a 15-year-old in England. How does I know they're all independent, but do you as their friends or each other say it's time to go for the emotional standing, or does that not happen, or is it always going after the next shot? When is
I think that happens with it. The community is rather small. It's a small group of people. Most of us know each other. Like I've known Heidi, as she said, for 30 years. I've known Heathcliff for probably at least 20 years and so on. And I remember having conversations with Heathcliff in Ukraine about next steps, when to go, when not to go. Same with Heidi. I think we look out for each other and see, are you burned out? Have you seen too much? Are you not working properly? Are you making bad decisions? In the end, obviously, it's up to the individual or that individual's organization to decide whether they should leave or not. But I think that we are, as colleagues, are kind of the first line in trying to say, like, you do need to take a break. You've been here too long.
Yeah, and it's a war zone. Every place that you seem to go is a war zone. So, okay,
right.
Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Thanks, Ron. Well, I think, Ron, why don't you send us off for the evening?
Well, I think one of the most important things about what Frank has been doing with these pieces is actually very crucial to the success of the Ukrainians' ability to at least defend themselves, if not retake some of their lost territory, is the fact that obviously, given the economic situation here, given that this has been going on now for more than 4 months, you can see it's no longer every day on the front page or the top of the news and so on. And that's one of the things that I personally think that the Russians are counting on, that the impact, whether here in the States or in Europe, on the individuals with the fuel and inflation and so on, will be enough to push people to tell their governments to stop supporting Ukraine. And if that happens, then Ukraine will most likely wind up losing the war, and we won't know what will happen next. And so this continuation of why Heidi's still there, why I'm going back, why Heath's going back, and so on, is to continue to remind everybody that even though it's not on the front pages every day, people are dying every day. Liberty is being fought for every day, and we are all part of that. We have elections coming up here in a couple of months. Ukraine is part of that conversation. God willing, it won't be part of the 2024 conversation, but at the moment it is. And for those of you that believe that what the United States, NATO, Western Europe are doing are correct, make sure that your representatives know that, and because that should give them enough power to continue to support the Ukrainians.
There you go. So everybody, thank you, Ron, very, very much.
Sure, my pleasure.
Yeah, we appreciate that. So everyone, have a good weekend. Lot to digest. Again, I thank you so much for all coming in, and we'll see you next time.